Hey, welcome to Superfluous Studios. I'm Jeff. Today I've got a vintage amp demo for you. I'm going to be playing through a Gibson GA-15 RVT, also called an Explorer. This is a little bit of a strange amp. They're known for being absolutely terrible in the vintage amp communities. So I wanted to play through this amp. I'll tell you a little bit about it, and then you can decide for yourself. See if it's really as bad as everybody says, or maybe not. Maybe it's got some good things going for it. So before I get to playing through it, I'll tell you a little bit about the amp. If you're not interested in that stuff, skip ahead to whatever time it says down there, and you can check out what it sounds like. So here we go. So why did I pick this kind of weird amp? Well, first of all, Gibson amps in general from that era, they kind of have a reputation for being a little strange, not quite like Fenders or Marshalls or some of the other amps that were out there. And they're known to have some good models and some okay models from around then and some really atrocious models. And this particular model is one of the ones that really has a reputation as being absolutely awful. This is the amp that's so bad that Skip Simmons, probably the leading authority on vintage amp repair in the world, said that this amp is so bad you can't even mod it to sound good. You should just either throw it in the trash or tear out the inside and put a new circuit in there that sounds good. So a little bit about this particular amp. I got this one sight unseen, and I got it pretty cheap. These things usually go for maybe $250, $300 online. Sometimes you'll see them listed for more, but they don't really sell for that much more than that. So this is a really cheap amp. I did do a few repairs on it. I replaced the filter caps. Those were completely dead. The input jacks were completely rusted and dead also, so I took those out. I put a single jack in there. This comes with 3 input jacks, but they're all identical. So I took those out and just put one in because I'm never going to hook more than one thing up to it at a time anyway. I changed the resistor on there so it has the same input impedance. So the on-off switch was dead. It came with a rotary switch that has 2 ons for the different polarity. When it had a 2-prong plug, that didn't work at all, so I took that out and put in a regular on-off Carling switch. Put in a 3-prong cord along with that, and the only other thing I think I did to this was that I replaced the depth knob on the tremolo. That was totally frozen and I couldn't get it unfrozen and couldn't get it to work, so that's been replaced as well. Now, if you're the kind of person who works on amps, you also know that Gibson amps from this era have a reputation for being terribly difficult to work on relative to Fender amps. This particular model I didn't find to be that bad. Not nearly as bad as the Falcons, which are the GA-19 RVT and tend to be a lot more popular than this. It doesn't have that board in there that it's practically impossible to solder on and practically impossible to get to any of the components. This one was actually pretty easy to work on. There's lots of space in there. Things are laid out pretty logically and in a way that you can get to them on the board. So this amp is a combo. It comes with a Jensen C12Q. It's a pretty nice speaker. Those are the mid-weight magnet. You'd find those in a lot of the amps of this size of that era. It's a 12-inch speaker. The reverb is an interesting one. Unfortunately, when I was getting this amp ready for this demo, I broke one of the tabs off of the reverb transformer. Those tabs were held on really, really poorly onto there, and that is attached directly from that to the reverb tank. So you're not going to get to hear that in this. But nonetheless, it's okay reverb. Certainly not as good as Fender or Ampeg reverbs from that same era. It does do one cool thing, which is that in this circuit, that reverb is completely separate from the master volume and the dry signal going through it. So you can turn down the volume all the way on the dry signal and still control the volume of the reverb, as opposed to what you can do with a Fender amp. Now, I don't know that you would actually use that for anything, maybe if you're playing some shoegaze music or want to do some ambient soundscape stuff, but it's a cool party trick either way. This amp has 2 6BQ5 power tubes. That's the same thing as EL84s, so the 6BQ5 is just the US designation for that same tube. This one still has the original RCA 6BQ5s in it. So why do these things get such a bad rep? So these Gibson amps from this era are famous for having what is often referred to as a tone suck circuit in there, and that's a resistor capacitor network that the signal goes through. And I think it's in there to reduce hum But a lot of people in these amps and the other Gibson amps that are more popular, the first thing they'll do is take that out, and that kind of takes some of the deadening and the dampening of that sound out. Now, I haven't done that to this amp. Like I said, this is the original circuit. So I'm going to be demoing this amp today with my Grez Guitars Folsom Smuggler's Bridge. It's got Lollar P90s in it. Cool sounding guitar. Quickly about my recording setup, I have this mic'd with a Shure SM57 along with the Royer R121. I chose that because to me that combination sounds about as close as you can get to the sound of the amp in the room. I have those running into a couple of API preamps. I've got those with the gain down low so they shouldn't be coloring the sound too much, and running into a Universal Audio Apollo and then into Logic. Don't have any other processing on this, just going straight through there so you can really get a sense of what the amp sounds like. Okay, so here we go. I've got the amp turned on now. I've got it cranked all the way up to 10. I think that's where it sounds best. I've got the bass up to 10. Like I mentioned earlier, you really got to put it up there. It sounds pretty thin. So we'll start out with this dirty sound, and then we'll go from there. By the way, as you can tell, it sounds pretty nice and quiet when I've got the volume down on my guitar. So let's see how it sounds. Let's see how it cleans up if I turn the volume on the guitar down a little bit. All right, let's see how it sounds if I turn down the volume on the amp a little. All right, let's check out what that trem can do. Okay, I got the trem depth all the way up and the speed all the way down to see how far we can go with it. Okay, let's see if we can get that tremolo into a little bit more of a normal range. So there you go. So what do I think about it? Well, I actually think it's got a pretty good vintage rock and roll dirty tone there. I think it's got some nice crunch also if you turn down the volume a little bit. I think it does kind of start to sound thin when you get to the clean tone. So yeah, it's a little bit of a one-trick pony. I think it's also worth considering that this amp is probably worth $200-300 on a good day. Now, when you compare that to Fenders from a similar era, they're going to be black panel or maybe the later 60s silver panel amps. Those things are going to be hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And if you get the really valuable ones like, say, a Deluxe Reverb or a Princeton Reverb from that 64, 65 pre-CBS era, you're talking about many thousands of dollars for an amp like that. So I don't know if it's really comparable in that way. Now, again, that being said, clean tone on this, not ever going to compare to anything like that, but it does have a pretty cool crunchy tone. So that's it. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Is this amp as bad as everybody says it is? Does it have some redeeming qualities for a couple $100? Would you buy it? Let me know what you think.